So in this video, I'll tell you why do I have a different lures this time with me, why have I changed to an intermediate line, what depths am I going to be looking them at, and how do I approach the pre-spawn pike fishing. Hopefully you will pick up a couple of tips today, so tune in, give it a like, and we're gonna be in for a good day's fishing, I hope. That was nice. Now, that's 2 fish in about 5 or 6 casts. Unfortunately, we didn't get to see them because they weren't properly hooked, but it's a fantastic start. And what I'm doing today is I'm fishing for a pre-spawn pike. Just one note to say at the start: if you know that they're already spawning, let them be at it. Give them a break, couple of weeks. Don't fish for them. However, when you are just before the spawning time, as I am today, or after the spawning time, the fishing can be excellent. They're not spawning quite yet. The water temperature is 5.7 degrees, so that's too cold for them to start spawning. However, spawning is not only about the water temperature, it's also about the length of the day, the amount of sunlight. So regardless of the water temperature, they will be spawning sooner or later. I expect they should be spawning in the next 2 weeks or so. So today they should be just getting ready for spawning. And in this video I'll tell you how to fish for them, where to look for them, the spots I'm fishing, how I'm changing my fishing, and I'll tell you about the pike behavior and how to get them to bite. The spring is in the air, the fish are moving, and hopefully we'll be in there for a good day. Yeah, there's one. Oh. Okay, so let me release this fish and I'll tell you where to look for them in the first place. Beautiful little specimen. You can see the leech on the gill cover. Might get rid of that. Free him from the leech. That means they were very dormant in the last couple of weeks. They were sitting low, they were sitting quiet, they were sitting on the bottom. That's how the leech got onto them. But now with the spring in the air, they're starting to move again. Lovely. Go and grow. So firstly, where to look for them, for the pre-spawn pike? Well, shallower is the simplest answer. By why shallower and where exactly? So if you're fishing a still water, you need to be looking for them near their spawning ground. So they will be spawning in the overflooded grasses, shallow bays, where the water gets warmer much quicker and where there is plenty of vegetation. So that's usually where they will be spawning. You want to find those places. You want to be fishing near those spawning grounds, not at them, just near them, because pike won't be quite there yet. They will be just getting ready at this stage. So another reason for a shallow water is that all these bait fish that only 2-3 weeks ago was sitting in 7, 8, 9, 10 meters of water where it was warmer, is now moving up to shallower water. The shallower water gets warmer quicker and they get more sunlight here. They feel the spring is in the air and the pike are hungry just before the spawning. These are the last weeks and the last days when they want to get to their top conditions just for spawning, and they will feed on those fish. They will follow to a shallower water just to get closer to the spawning grounds, get ready for that, but also they will follow the bait fish. So at this time of the year I like to fish in the 2, 3, 4 meters of water on the slopes coming into a shallow base, or if you're fishing in the river, a nice big not too deep eddy would be nice. Again, something where the water is not flowing that quickly and has the chance to warm up that little bit quicker, and it's shallow enough to give them a good spawning grounds. In the winter I was using a Sink 7 line just to get down to the fish, and I was getting some success with that line. However, now I'm back on the intermediate line. I want to be fishing in this top 1-2 meters of the water because that's where the fish are. So that's the locations and depth covered. When it comes to lures or flies, smaller patterns work better this time of the year in my opinion. And as much as I love this fly fishing larky, I must say that small jerkbaits and small paddle tails are really hard to beat this time of the year. They let you cover the water much quicker than a fly and let you find the fish much quicker. And generally, very early in the spring, pike do react much better to smaller lures and smaller flies. As a matter of fact, my personal best so far, over 26 pounds or over 12 kilo, was caught on a small SALMO Slider in the pike pattern. You know what, I'm actually feeling like giving jerkbaits a go now. So let me show you that and talk you through the lures a little bit. I absolutely love my large lures fishing, but in the springtime, before spawning, I wouldn't be without some small lures, like the Fatso, the SALMO Slider in 10 centimeters, and a small paddle tails. I wouldn't go fishing for pike without these three. So the pike starting to moving a bit more this time of the year. You will see that in my box, beside the tried and trusted large lures like a Miuras Mouse or the Hammer Pro from Dragon, I also have now a couple of smaller lures. I have some very small paddle tails, and when I mean very small, they might be about 6 inches. And I have plenty of jerkbaits. That's the one that caught me the biggest pike so far. SALMO Slider in sinking and in floating version, as well as the Fatso in a strong perch color, as well as a more natural perch color. And last but not least, this pike slider from SALMO. I don't really remember the name. And for this type of fishing, you don't need those extra heavy rods that can punch 200 and 300 grams lures. You can get away with something much lighter, which is much more enjoyable to use. And for that, I have this beautiful Skyline from Favorite. It's not the TZ version, it's the cheaper standard Skyline version, which is absolutely fantastic. It's 8 feet 4 inches. It can cast from 30 to 100 gram lures. It's a very light, very nicely balanced. And the one thing I can tell you, the tip in these rods is out of this world. Every take, every hit on this rod feels like a pure joy. So let's give this little pike a bash and we'll get a bigger pike on that little pike now. The beauty of a slider fishing is that they cast like a bullet. They go absolutely miles and miles. And that's fantastic because you can cover much water much faster and you can locate the pike. So it's not a bad idea to start from a jerk and see where the pike is. And then if you locate them, you can change lures or change flies and have some fun. And when it comes to working jerks, the typical way is working with a rod tip, and you can do it to a side, you can do it up, down. Now I'm doing it to a side because it's the handiest when on the float tube. However, you can also do it with your reel, just like so. And last but not least, you can just do a straight retrieve, which works excellent. You don't need to be doing any jerks, they go side by side, not as aggressively as when jerking, but that kind of a gentle wobble very often does the trick. And occasionally you can give a small twitch. Another tip when fishing a jerk, get yourself a stiff trace. None of these are very soft 7-strand ones, but rather, oh, I think I had a hit the, oh, yeah. I'm sorry. But rather one of those stiffer ones, either strong or take fluorocarbon, like I'm using at the moment, or one of the stiffer wires, like titanium wire. If they clench the jaws, just like that, put them on the back, pull gently, and they open it straight away. Nice one. And do use barbless hooks. They're much better for the fish. The fish won't come off, believe me. If you keep the tension, they won't come off the hook. But crush all the barbs the way I'm crushing here. It comes unhooking pike much better and much safer for the fish. Also, much safer for you. You wouldn't want this big hook in your finger, and if it does happen to go in the finger, it's much safer, much easier for you to take it out without the barbs. Now, did I say the reason for stiffer traces? I'm not sure if I have with that pike, but the reason for stiffer traces is that with that jerking motion, the jerk goes side to side to side, and with a softer traces, hooks will actually catch the trace, the line, as you do the jerking motion. So a thicker and stiffer trace eliminates this problem hugely and will make the fishing much more enjoyable. And here is the proof what I said. Now this will happen a lot if you use soft traces. Now the reason for these 3 lures is that the slider will allow you to cover depth to about 1.5 meters, touching 2 meters. The Fatso is a different presentation, but it also goes a little bit deeper. I can cover depth to about 3 meters with that. And again, it's a completely different presentation when it comes to a paddle tail, but also with this 10-gram jig head, I can let it drop all the way to the bottom and work it up the slopes a little bit deeper than a Fatso, and again deeper than slider. So with that said, let's put the Fatso and we work it a little bit deeper now. Oh, just missed one there. Fatso has a very different action to a SALMO slider, and I also work it differently. Whereas the slider is a very erratic action and I like jerking with it side to side, the SALMO Fatso has a much more subtle wobbling action and tighter action, which very often works for the bigger pike, I find. And I also work it differently. Whereas I do the jerking motion when it comes to the sliders for a Fatso, I let it drop if I know I'm fishing a little bit deeper, and then I work it slowly, steady, with an occasional jerk and a short pause after jerk. That means it goes straight, wobbly, and then the action I'm imposing with this movement is darting to the side as if it's seen a predator, darting to the side and stopping. At that stop, very often hits come in. Yeah, as I was telling you, just after the jerk. They seem very hardy fish, but they are very delicate actually, so do take care of them. And look at this back and this side here. That was a big jaw of a big pike. Okay, off you go. The other one, the one that grabbed this one, that's the one we want. On the Fatso again. The slow, steady retrieve of this Fatso is really good. And it often gives a little bit better of the fish. See that belly? They're feeding well just before the spawning. Here's one. Just was a tiny tick. And if not for that tip, I don't think I would actually felt it all on the extra heavy rod. Now fish after fish on this SALMO, they really are good. But I'll change it anyway, just to cover the third presentation I talked to you about. So we'll just cast it a little bit further out and let it go a little bit lower in the water column before bringing it back in. Not all the way down, about half depth. And that's it. 3 casts, 3 fish. Oh. Not bad. Go back where you belong. Hey, nervous fish that was. The beauty of these smaller paddle tails is that with a bit of a weight, not too much, you can let it drop all the way down to the bottom and then work it slowly up the slope towards the shallow water which is a deadly presentation for pike. The edges of a deep and a shallow water and slopes is where they love to ambush their prey. They're not long runners, they're sprinters. They like to have a cover behind them. And sometimes you might see a small jack hiding behind a single piece of a weed or a grass in the shallow water, and they think you can't see them. But the point is, they love a bit of a cover, and they very often will look for some structure, and the slope is an ideal ambush spot. I missed this one. Oh no, he's back. Look at that belly. What we have here is a shallow bay. Where I'm casting, there is only 1 meter of the water. So that's where they will be spawning in maybe 2 weeks' time. The small fish gather in those bays before the big mamas come in. So I'm sure there is a couple of more jacks around here. I don't expect to find a big fish here, but there might be a bit more action. On the SALMO Fatso. I love this lure, absolutely love this lure. And last, but not least, as much as the small lures are good in the spring, big lures can still score beautifully, and of course they are way more selective than the small lures. So we are in 5 meters of water. We might put an extra 7 gram. I don't put it right on the clip, but rather just above it. Now the beauty of these lures is that they're not as heavy as other extra large lures, but it's not about the weight, it's about the water movement. Now the two tails, the big head and the flat front, that pushes a lot of water. And pike predominantly feed with their lateral line. They don't rely as much on a side and smelt as they do on the lateral line. So the more water movement a lure makes, the easier it is to locate it by a pike. And it doesn't need to be a huge lure, although big lures do help, they're more selective. But it needs to be a lure that makes a lot of water movement, not the size itself. What's the most important? It's a nice fish. Look at this mouse down deep there. Deep, but with the barbless hooks, it comes out just like that. Nice one. Oh, just had a proper take, but unfortunately it didn't hook itself. Maybe that's why. I think that's a bit better. I just paused for a second just to put my hood on, and on the pause she hit. That's a nice bite. There's one hook. There's the other one. Barbless, just like that. Oh, that's bad. Can you see that belly? Okay, we let her go now. 98 centimeters. Nice chunky fish. Beautiful. What a day, fishing for pre-spawning pike. I hope you picked up a couple of tips and tricks during the video, and if you did, why don't you leave it a thumbs up, and if you manage to see it before they spawn, just give it a go, try these tactics. And so with a good mix of small lures and some big lures and fishing top of shallower edges, you might be in for a nice day's fishing. Unhooked itself. So I'll stay here for a little longer, and I'll see you in the next video.